What's up, guys, and welcome to the first ever live edition of the ContederCast. I am Nolan King, and I'm joined by the one and only Big Tony Fagnano. What's up, man? How much did I just butcher your last name?
No, you did all right, Mr. Kings. I thought you did a good job.
Okay, that's good. But another Contender Series episode in the books, and it's a pretty good one. A lot of entertaining back and forth action on this episode. You know, we've become so accustomed, I think, in the last couple of weeks to these crazy knockouts. But this week we had some more action that we'll be delving into. What did you think overall? Without giving away too much, were you happy with it? What was your overall thoughts on this week's card?
I thought this was one of my favorites. Yeah, out of I liked it better than last week. I'll say that.
Yeah, for sure. I think last week was just, again, like, Contender Series has never, in my opinion, on the how many episodes have we had now? 13 episodes that they've done between the two seasons. I don't think that we've had one that has been necessarily a stinker as an episode as a whole. So we're making out pretty well. We're 13 for 13 in the entertainment department. This one, it got kicked off in a great way with Edmund Shabazian coming in, taking out Antonio Jones in 40 seconds. The Ronda Rousey training partner, and also, I don't know what you want to call it, but the underling, I guess, managed by Ronda Rousey and Edmund Taverdian as well. Edmund Shabazian just putting Glendale Fighting Club back on the map, taking out the Fury FC fighting middleweight champion. What did you think of his overall performance? And for as quick as it was, were you able to kind of pick up on your overall opinion on his skill set?
Yeah, it was so fast. I didn't even just the fact that he was able to put away an experienced guy like that, speaks for itself. But I really wasn't. The fight didn't go long enough for us to really see a lot of the, what he brings to the table. So, and with him being so green, it's a little hard. Basically, I would have liked to see more, and we got to see more of some of the other prospects, which we'll get to later. But this one was over so quick. It's not like we can ding him for finishing opponent fast, but there's just not a whole lot to go off of there,
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we'll get into later on. Is I always say this. I think you get a better picture, a better overall assessment of a fighter when you're able to see that fighter react to other things that their opponent throws at them. If you go out there and you get a 40-second knockout, we sure as hell see what your strength is, but we don't get to see where your weaknesses are and how you adjust to different things. We don't know anything about Edmund Shabazian's ground game still. I'm a little surprised that Antonio Jones, and I guess it wasn't really his choice. Shabazian did a great job of engaging Jones and getting the fight to be a little wild right off the bat, but we didn't see much of his ground game. So that's just a black hole that we don't know we don't know if it even exists. So,
we don't know if he has head movement either.
Yeah, that is true. We didn't get to that point in the fight. And, yeah, man, I think he's 20 years old. He has a lot of potential ahead of him one way or another. We're really judging it off this performance because not much tape exists. So I guess the middleweight division, we can use him.
I was honestly worried when they said he's racked up 6 wins in a year. I'm like, who's he fighting that he got to 6 wins in a year? Are we getting a guy here, with an inflated record, basically?
And I think the problem was, Tony, that looking it over, it kind of was that inflated record. You look at, I'm just going through the 6 fights that he had prior to the Knights fight.
We talked about this on last week. So.
Yeah. 17-38, 1-4, 0-0, 0-1, 0-0, and 3-2. Those were his wins before this. So
yeah, because he was in CXF and Gladiator and all the California promotions out here that. We don't need to talk about California regional promotions.
Yeah, exactly, man. And again, this is an example that I think going forward, that we can use to support my argument that while judging this fight on paper, you see the type of resume that Shabazian had with all these fighters that are clearly not very successful in MMA. That doesn't necessarily mean that the fighter that's winning doesn't have good talent. We've seen it in the past. Nasrat Hakparast, who's fighting this weekend in Hamburg, he was fighting all guys that had similar records to Shabazian opponents. Only it was overseas in smaller, countries outside of Germany, things like that. So you can't really truly judge the fighter based on his opponents, but it also makes you hard to truly believe in his skills too. So it's always going to be a weird battle we get in, but just this idea that people that are deemed can crushers always turn out to be flukes in the UFC or higher levels is just not true, in my opinion.
Yeah, you won this week. We'll revisit that later on.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, that was a good fight. Overall, as quick as it was impressive and got people buzzing right off the bat.
Yeah, 40 seconds. I said 40 seconds. I mean,
yeah, 40 seconds, man. That's can't get much better than that. And moving on to the second fight, this was just a back and forth war. We had a pair of these on this Contender Series. Austin Vandefort, Paige Van Zandt's fiance, versus Angelo Trevino from Team Alpha Male. Vandefort was getting a lot of flack, I felt, going into this fight because a lot of people. Well, I mean, it stems from the tweet that he had where he said that he was Paige Van Zandt's man and they should sign him to the UFC. Which I also have to say, selfish plug, that tweet featured an article by yours truly. So I think I'm kind of responsible for this ball rolling in general, but
you're responsible for the hate. Okay.
Yeah. But overall, man,
it's Sir Nolan King.
Yeah, but after all the hate that he did receive leading up to the fight, Tony, what did you think of his performance overall?
Man, I was super impressed because I didn't really give him a shot versus Trevino, and I don't root for guys, but when Trevino's comments, about Vandefort kind of had me not rooting for Vandefort, but made me think Trevino was kind of overlooking him, taking this fight lightly, maybe even looking into the rivalry between. Every time someone leaves Team Alpha Male, it's always big drama show. I don't know why. It's like guys leave camps all the time. It's not that big of a deal. But Team Alpha Male somehow always makes it like a big issue. So I don't know what was up there. And like I thought maybe, he's taking that a little bit too seriously. And then Vandefort gets absolutely pummeled at the end of the first round. And looks like, fight's about to be stopped any second. He's seriously hurt. And honestly, I think, what I was thinking too was, especially after the fight previous, it seems like in Contender Series, the refs tend to be a little quicker with the stoppages on Dana White's Contender Series. For whatever reason, if that's for more the entertainment factor or, just saving these guys damage because it is a Contender Series fight and not an actual, UFC or, title fight or anything that they should be taking unnecessary damage on. But, either way, like it seems like the refs step in much quicker on Dana White's Contender Series than they would in a regular UFC fight. So I thought the ref was going to step in and stop this. He didn't. He let it continue, and it's a good thing he did because Vandefort comes back in the second round, looks completely, refreshed, like wasn't phased at all by nearly getting finished in the first round. I was honestly a little worried because in the corner, I mean, at least his body language and some of the stuff he was saying, I was like, this guy seems like he's done. But nope, comes out in the second round, blasts Trevino, gets some really good shots and drops him. Now it's his turn to get on top of him, lands some ground and pound, locks up that rear naked choke, and it's over. And I'm like, not only did this guy show toughness, he showed heart, and he showed the ability to come back and finish, and also be able to finish guys. This is honestly somebody who's kind of out of his, at least in my opinion, was out of his league, and he beat him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the only problem that I had with Vandefort because people were saying, oh, the only reason that he got here is because of Paige Van Zandt, which I think is kind of a half truth. I don't think that it's necessarily the only reason he got there because he clearly is a talented guy. Like he just went in there, took out a Team Alpha Male, a top competitor from one of the best gyms in the United States. So clearly the guy can compete. Granted, his record was a little lower, but overall, man, I'd say, say he wasn't related to Paige Van Zandt, say he had never met her in his life, I would think that this guy deserved to be there. I think he just proved that. I think you can't argue it. It's a fact at this point. So yeah, like you said, great performance by him. For a wrestler, he showed off his hands a little bit. Still has some things to improve on. I think going forward, I'm sure he's a guy that we'll probably see signed to the UFC down the line. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. And even Trevino, Trevino put on a good performance too. He was seconds away from winning that fight in the first round. I was absolutely shocked that that fight wasn't stopped. I was sure, like, multiple points in that flurry, that it was like one punch away from being done. So props to both guys. That fight was just premier entertainment for Contender Series. And it led us into our third fight of the night, which was Chibwicka Onyengacha. I know you've been practicing saying that name quite a bit off air. And, he took on Anthony Adams, short notice replacement. Adams just fought on June 30th. He fought a 5-round fight for a middleweight title. He's usually a welterweight fighter. Moved up 1 week's notice to take on a relatively unknown fighter in Chibwicka Onyengacha. What did you think in this fight? It was it was quite the staring contest at points, a lot of wasted movement, it seemed, but both guys also showed that they have some potential, or they just might be a little bit rough around the edges. And then my other question is, did you have anything to do with the lights going out during that fight?
Yep, I wanted to see
the Wild Wings thing.
I wanted to see the first. I think the UFC needs to up the entertainment factor to match company or promotions like WWE and other stuff. So I thought they should do a blacked out kind of arena, and then either have the guys wear night vision goggles, or maybe like have like some like kind of like glow in the dark type paint, so that they can see each other, and like just to have like this very cool like retro look to it. So that was my plan, but it didn't work out, fortunately.
Next time, man, next time. But yeah, overall with this fight, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. I think the decision did go the right way. And Chibwicka Onyengacha by split decision. That was the
highlight of this fight for me was Michael Bisping repeatedly calling him, "I'm gonna get you."
Yeah. No, I mean, I believe, maybe I'll have to check this. Hold on one second. But I don't think that Onyengacha has a nickname yet. So
I tweeted out from the MMA Today account. I said
I did see that.
Should be his nickname.
It is. I mean, that's just like it's just a gimme at this point, So when you get that, it will be like a Hunter with the Violent Bob Ross. Everybody will be talking about how you'll go down in MMA nickname infamy as being.
How do you pronounce the whole thing like with the nickname? Because I want to hear it. I want to see if it rings.
Chibwicka, I'm gonna get you Onyengacha. Not too bad.
I mean, it's a mouthful, but yeah.
I mean, Bruce Buffer could pull it off.
Oh, Bruce Buffer could pull anything off.
True. But yeah, so that was kind of the only down point in the night, but we did have the entertainment where the lights went out, so that made up for everything. And then some.
That was Dana trying to up the entertainment factor. He's just like, oh, this is not enough. Like, let's turn the lights off.
Kind of true, man, because I was thinking, that was probably like 90 seconds or so the lights were out, and obviously the announcers, Michael Bisping and Brendan Fitzgerald, the commentators, excuse me, they made a clear point to point this out too, that both these fighters are a minute and a half away. They know they need to finish. So it was kind of cool at the end there. We saw both guys with, they were almost fresh, like at that point. They had an extra minute and a half, and they kind of had a lot of energy, and it was interesting because they had the energy that they would have had at the start of round 2 or partway through round 1, and they only had 90 seconds to fight. So we got some good action at the end there, and it's just too bad that hadn't happened a little sooner. But yeah, overall, again, even the bad fights in Contender Series aren't the worst fights. So next fight, I think, was the highlight of the Contender Series this week. Domingo Pilarte versus Vince Morales. This one was an absolute war. Just like the Van de Fort Trevino fight, the guy that ended up getting the first big shots of the fight ended up winning. Actually, that's not true. Pilarte was landing the biggest shots, hurt Morales. Morales hit Pilarte with a brutal overhand, I believe. It was one of those ones where the fighter, you can just tell like they're still with it mentally, but the punch just hurt them so bad. Like he was holding his head, like just kind of backpedaling. So close, Morales, to getting that finish at the end of the first round. Second round comes out. You know, Vincent Morales just goes for a kind of a sloppy kick, gets taken down. Pilarte, one eye, can't even see out of one of them, gets the rear naked choke, and then they proceed to roll 3 times or 2 times across the ring. Morales will not tap, and he goes out cold. So I thought that was a phenomenal performance. They haven't had a whole lot of the lighter guys on the season. I thought that was just a reason why going forward they should start considering more bantamweights and flyweights, because that was a fantastic fight, and maybe the best one we've had this season. So, what's up with all these comebacks, Tone? What's up with what's up with it?
I don't know. It was cool to see. I was high on Pilarte coming in. I was high on both these guys. Each 7-1, I believe. Pilarte having fought in promotions like Fury FC, Legacy, which then turned into LFA, of course, and he had a fight in LFA. So a good pedigree coming into this. So I was excited for this one, and then obviously showing that heart, and after that, I was like, what are they gonna do? Obviously it's before we get to the main event, but I was like, we've now had 2 comebacks. Do guys get dinged for getting hurt early on and then coming back, or do they get bonus points for showing heart? It kind of brought up like this, conflicting, what do we do here kind of thing. I was impressed with both guys. So maybe it'll be one of those things where, like the loser of these close fights will get second chances, because like you said, and like we saw on this podcast many times, and like we saw last year, we've seen winners and losers get the call up to the UFC as a late replacement, or whatever injury fill in or whatever, quite often.
Absolutely, man. And it reminds me a lot of the fight between Brandon Davis and Austin Arnett last year. And both those guys ended up getting signed. So I wouldn't be shocked if, even coming off a loss, Morales goes to the UFC, 27 years old. Going into this fight, I usually talk about prospects and how I think they're good and stuff. But there's been a few times in the last year where I've really called out and said, this guy's really good. Watch out for him. I did it with Anthony Hernandez earlier this year. I thought Vince Morales was going to be my sleeper, like underdog pick, kind of under the radar. And I think he showed some really good skills in this fight. He's UFC caliber for sure, but I had to eat crow. Him and his cousin Ricky Simone, the 2 times that I've made specific tweets to say, watch this guy, watch this guy, watch this guy. Simone almost lost that UFC debut. A lot of people were all over me for that, and then this one tonight with Vince. But I'm sure he'll bounce back. He'll be back in there, and congrats to Domingo Pilarte. The guy fought his heart out. He wasn't even there to accept. A little spoiler alert: he was one of the ones picked by Dana White, and he wasn't even there to accept the contract because he was so beat up. He had to go to the hospital. After the fight too, like the interview with Lara Sanko, man, that guy's just really displayed what a warrior he was. He couldn't even, she went to shake his hand, he didn't even see it. Like he just kind of, his eye was so swollen, he didn't remember. He was like, yeah, I wasn't even hurt in that fight. Like, he got some good ones in on me early. Like, you could just tell, like, that sequence wasn't even registering in his brain. So, props to him. Just one of those badass MMA dudes, and it's good to add him to the UFC roster. He brings an exciting and unique skill set to the cage. So, going forward, we'll be seeing him in the UFC octagon. Another person we'll be seeing in the UFC octagon, Macy Barber, the 20-year-old phenom from LFA, headlining this Contender Series episode against the returning Jamie Colleen. Colleen won on last year's Contender Series against Tiffany Masters. It was one of the best fights of the season. She was not signed, unfortunately. Tore her ACL up or injured it in that fight, reoccurring injury with her. Took a whole year off and returned to the cage tonight. Unfortunately for her, Macy Barber just took over, showed why she's so highly touted, and she ended up earning the contract. Were you impressed by her performance, Tone? I don't know how much you knew of her before. She had one big fight for LFA, but what kind of addition do you think she makes to the UFC's women's divisions?
Wait, you don't remember me last week like hyping up Macy Barber?
I think you're making this up.
I totally.
Okay.
Yeah, go back and watch.
I believe you. I believe you.
All over Macy.
I just know you. I know you can tend to be a casual a lot of times. You kind of,
Oh, okay.
Not really fault. No, I'm kidding.
I swear to God, I hyped her the hell up.
I believe you. You must have been on a bandwagon that was doing the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. But I think she is the next. I think she is the female version of Erin Pico. I stand by that comment. I don't care what anybody. Don't at me about that.
I already did.
You give me a gift. That's not really. I don't know if that's adding me.
It's like my passive aggressive adding.
That fits your style. I think that fits your style. But like, she's that. God, this is such a cliche and overused term, but I don't even want to say it. Like she's just one of those younger fighter who's been training since she was very young, in all disciplines. Who's meant to fight MMA. Like not someone who was like, oh, like I was a kickboxer and now I'm just going to decide that I want to do MMA and like learn all these other things. Like, no, she grew up like training to be an MMA fighter. And I think that's an important distinction between this new, I'm trying to think of another word besides breed, this new up and coming generation. There we go. This new generation of fighters that's training, that doesn't have like MMA as like a fallback option. Like, oh, I wrestled in high school or whatever, and now I'm going to do MMA because that kind of interests me or whatever. I don't have anything. There's nowhere else for me to go athletically wise with wrestling. These are just fighters that are completely different class. And man, Macy Barber really showed all of that, on the feet, on the ground, busted up Jamie Colleen real bad. I'm sure she was sitting in a hospital bed right next to your boy that got the contract. She got split open. I mean, that was just a beautiful performance capped off with a really gnarly KO. So, Macy Barber lives up to the hype, lives up to her nickname, The Future. And I think we're going to be seeing her. I think they're going to throw her right in the fire. They're going to give her some strawweight right off the bat who's going to be a tough test. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised she was signed. I saw some people saying, oh, well, yeah, she didn't go out there and put on these type of either badass or decisive fights that some of these other fighters did. But honestly, like, you look at the landscape of the show.
Wait, that wasn't dominant?
No, what I'm saying is that there were some people that were complaining, saying that the fights like the Austin Vanderfort one and the Domingo one and the Shabazian, like when I put out the tweet saying, oh, like, who do you think is going to get the contract? There were a lot of people that were discluding Macy from their picks. And there was also a fair amount of people that I saw tweet like, oh, wow, they're going to give Barber one, like, regardless of that. Like, I don't know. I just think what you got to understand here,
now you got me
their argument to a certain extent, but she fits so well in what they want. Like, there's certain fighters you look at, like, if Nick Newell wins next week, say, like, Nick Newell goes out there, it's like, close fight, kind of slow fight, and he ends up getting, like, a third-round submission. Like, he's going to probably, like, pick up a contract no matter what. Like, that's just the way it is. There's certain – Greg Hardy, same thing. Greg Hardy wins by knockout this next fight, like, unless they put him on the development deal more, there's no way – basically what I'm saying is that even though there might be people on the undercard that put on, kind of crazy, gutsy performances or dominant performances, like, these people that they're trying to promote the most, Antonina Shevchenko, Nick Newell, Greg Hardy, those type of fighters, I think when tie goes, like, the tie goes to the runner, the tie goes to the headliner. That's what I feel like. And honestly, like, her skill set in this division, like, she should be in the UFC, no doubt about it. But I just see some people arguing that it takes away from the – and I don't necessarily agree with it, that it takes away –
I'm, like, ready to go. This is some bullshit.
Yeah, go for it. Unload on me.
Because
messenger,
there is no tie here. Like, what is the tie? It's a dominant performance. I mean, I don't know what people are pulling from that performance that they thought she didn't do enough in the fight or didn't deserve the contract. From beginning to end, she was dominating the fight. She finished her opponent in a devastating way. I mean, did you see Jamie Colleen's face afterwards? Yeah. And this wasn't a layup that they gave her. This was a girl who was on Contender Series last year and absolutely dominated some other chick and submitted her in like the first or second round. So what are we complaining about here? And who did she like steal a contract from or whatever? I don't understand this. Like, if Jamie Colleen had won, she probably would have gotten a contract too. Like, they're in the main event. They're in the main event for a reason. This is a division that's shallow. I don't understand this at all. Like, and it's not like they were pushing one fight or the other. When they did the promos last week for the upcoming week, they showcased both fighters. They had Macy Barber and her story, and they had Jamie Colleen and her story, and both were compelling. It's not like, I could understand it. It's a lot different. Like, I will criticize Greg Hardy's next fight, right? The upcoming fight that Greg Hardy has with Contender Series is a layup. It's meant for him to get another highlight knockout, and so they can say, hey, let's give him the UFC contract, right? Like, nobody's going to argue that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not that fight. This was not that fight. Jamie Colleen was on last season and submitted some chick and totally could have submitted Macy Barber. So it's a different situation. If you're just going to put this out there every week, the main event, and they're just trying to push some guy or some girl, like, it's not like that. It's not so black and white. Like, every situation is different. And in this one, I think there's some dumb revisionist kind of history stuff going on here. But we will get to the white decision at some point. I do think, and I did not like the decision that was made, to be honest.
Let's get into it now. This is the way I'm thinking we do it this week. And yeah, I completely agree with all the points that you just made. I was, it was one of those things, like, I think those type of comments were more rolling in, I think, towards the end of the fight before she finished, and people were saying, if they're going to give out, a lot of this is hypothetical. It reminds me of like DraftKings. Like, there's just situational, like, Dana giving out contracts is almost like, it's not black and white. Like, there's certain things that work into it. Like, I looked at this week and I was sure, like, last season they gave out 2 contracts per episode on average. This season they seem to be like Oprah Winfreying it, like we said, where everybody gets a contract that impresses them. So like this, I keep having this feeling that Dana's going to like reel back and he's only going to take one person or 2 people at most. So this week I was thinking, like, they'll probably give it to Barber because she is exactly what they want. Like, she went out there, she put on a good performance against a tough girl, and she is promotable and 20 years old in a weight class that could always use new fighters. Like, that's not even debatable at this point. Then on top of that, I was thinking, okay, they'll probably take Shabazian. He's young, but he got a quick finish. Like, that's what you want out of these guys. He came in there, he did exactly what you asked him to do. 40-second knockout. You can't beat that. Then I was thinking, like, almost, what if, like, Pilarte and Vanderfort's wins were so similar? I was almost thinking that they might offset each other, like, in Dana's mind, where he doesn't want to take 4 contracts. Like, he doesn't want to sign 4 people, but how do you choose between Vanderfort and Pilarte? I mean, he obviously made the call, but I think there's certain things that go on in people's minds like that where they say, Dana's only going to take 2, or he's going to, you know what I mean? It's all theoretical. So I think those claims are a little misguided as well. But that's just like a rant on my part. But let's get down to the white decision. I was thinking this week what we could do. I will name the fighter that won each fight. You'll go first. You will say what you would have done with that person if you were Dana White, whether it be.
Oh shit! I'm in Dana White's shoes right now.
Yeah, you're making the white decision.
I gotta be.
Then I'll give my 2 cents briefly at the end. But Edmund Shabazian, 40-second.
Goofball, let's go.
Okay, Edmund Shabazian, 40-second TKO over Antonio Jones. What do you do with him?
I really like. Do I like act like I'm Dana, or can I just?
You can just act like you're Tony.
Oh, I wanted to act like I was Dana. This is no fun.
Only if you shave your head and your beard.
Oh, that's not gonna happen. No, I would look. You wouldn't even recognize me. Look like an ugly turtle.
You calling Dana an ugly turtle, man?
No, I'm saying I would if I tried to pull off that look. I mean, not saying he can pull off that look, but he's been rocking it for a long time. So he can keep that. I don't think I could do that. Anyway, I digress. If I really like Edmund. Like I said earlier in the show, a guy who was facing, some questionable opposition in the past, and not to knock him for the very quick finish. We didn't get to see a lot of his game here. I would sign him to a developmental contract or have him come back on the Contender Series.
Yeah, it's one of those things like this is a really good discussion. I don't know if we'll have time. Well, maybe we'll get into it next week, but I don't know how much just like with the whole idea of the show, I don't know how much theoretically in a perfect world consideration should be put into things that don't occur during the show. For example, if you bring in a guy that's 6-0 who has fought bad competition and you throw him on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, isn't it kind of the point of this whole thing to get UFC contracts? So if he goes out there and knocks out a fighter in 40 seconds, like what else would you need to see him do in order to give him a UFC contract? So under that label or that idea, I would say that, yes, I agree. In a perfect world, if we were judging them before they got to the UFC, I would say that he would have been a developmental level guy, a guy that is green, a guy that needs more experience. He's young and there's no reason to rush. Same time, he's on a show that's for UFC contracts. So I said before that the real White decision was made, that my White decision would be to sign Edmund to the UFC.
Okay, but if you're making that point, then why was Greg Hardy signed to a developmental deal and not a UFC contract?
Sure. That's a great question as well. That's something that went through my mind. I would have signed him to the UFC. Again, like
would have?
I would have, yes.
Not even though he had never had a pro fight before.
I would have, I mean, if you look at heavyweights, there's some guys that debut that are 4-0. Like he's not that far off, and he went out there and dominated a guy that I wouldn't say he's one of the top heavyweights in the United States. He's kind of a longer term prospect that probably would have been UFC bound if he had continued his trajectory. But yeah, I mean, for the sake of the show, like he's on there. The whole point is to impress Dana White and go out there and get a contract. And he beat like that. That's a good regional win. Beating a 4-0 fighter in your pro debut, like that's a good win, especially for heavyweight. It's hard to find fighters that are 4-0 at heavyweight in the regional scene. Like that's what the state of the North American heavyweight scene looks like. So honestly, I mean, again, taking aside all of his issues that he's had legally or moral issues, like
that's not something we're taking into account here at all. We're just taking into account that he had no pro fights, period.
Sure. Neither is CM Punk, and I think Greg Hardy has a lot more merit to be in that cage than him.
Oh God.
I mean, to be honest, man, the guy's a true exception. Like, look at Brock Lesnar, for example. I know he had the wrestling background, but he also had this athleticism that was unmatched. Like,
true.
He went in there with no, and I think that's somewhat merit based. Like, you have a heavyweight that is the most freakish athlete you've seen, and he like they put him on. The argument that you just made, you shouldn't have been on the show then, in my opinion. Like, he shouldn't have been on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series.
Some people might make that argument. I don't know.
Right. I think that's more of a fair argument than the one saying that he shouldn't have been you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. And
I mean, we're getting kind of sidetracked here, but like
good one,
with Greg Hardy, it's like I feel like this whole thing is just basically like, how can we market this show and also make it so it looks like Greg Hardy really earned this contract instead of us just giving it to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a big part of it too, but I just feel like you start getting really inconsistent when you start. I don't know. Honestly, this season the show's kind of taken on a life of its own. I feel like last year there was either you got a contract or you didn't get a contract. There was one developmental deal given out. Now Dana's going around saying there's short notice. This guy's going to go on the short notice list. This guy's going to get a developmental deal. This guy's going to go on tough. Like, I feel like there's a lot of different avenues they're handing out. So if that's the kind of show that they're going to make this into, like, I guess, yeah. I mean, the show's so early on that I can't hold them to consistency. But then I look at like a guy like Chris Curtis, right? And like, he was on the show and they're like, oh yeah, like, I mean, I'm guessing the reasoning, at least from what Dana said the next week when he signed Dwight Grant, he was like, yeah, I mean, if we're going to take somebody that's 33, one of these 33-year-old guys, I guess we'll have to sign Dwight Grant. And it's like, if 33 is too old for you to sign him, like, why bring him on the show? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of these guys, like, things either in girls, things that are either in their past or either help them or hurt them. And it's not like judged off of specifically the performance itself. Where I've been judging it off of the performance itself, which guys impressed me the most. Like, you know, if you say, oh, like, you know, I've seen it in the past, and I've done it myself. Like, Anthony Hernandez versus Jordan Wright, in retrospect, was a gross mismatch. That doesn't mean I think Anthony Hernandez shouldn't get a contract. Like, there's certain analyses that avenues that you can go down and say, oh, well, this guy had this or this person had this. And I just think that you kind of, in order to keep this thing honest with everybody, if that's what they're trying to do, which I know MMA honesty, like, what am I talking about here? You gotta, I don't know. I'm more of a purist when it comes to this type of stuff, but I don't know. I digress. I mean, do you have any more final thoughts on that before we move on?
Not on this fight, but I feel like it's going to come up again and maybe very soon.
Sure.
I feel like we're going to disagree on a few of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next fight was Austin Vandefort, you know, against Angelo Trevino. He got that second round submission. What would you have done with him? What would have been the white decision on Tony Fagnano's part? Fagnano.
So you have, I mean, you have this guy, you know, a lot of people doubted him coming in, you know, obviously has the, what do we call Paige Van Zandt? Do we call her, I mean, she's not a superstar, but she's
well-known.
Celebrity? I don't know. An influencer.
Sure, that's a good one.
An MMA fighter influencer. I don't know. Whatever you want to call her. You know, she's out there. She's got more of a social media following than a lot of UFC champions. It is what it is. So you have her fiance, Austin Vandefort, and who showed incredible toughness here. Heart came back. You know, survives a first round knockdown, almost gets finished, comes out in the second round, finishes his opponent, you know, gets that finish, that you know, decisive finish, and then you decide, well, Dana decided not to give him a contract, and I would have immediately locked him up because, one, you now have you know, Mr. Van Zandt. I think that's a marketable guy. And then you don't want him going somewhere else. I mean, this is a guy who's probably headed straight to Bellator now. Like,
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he'll do. I know obviously that the Gracie Baja, Portland, Chael Sonnen, Fabio Schörner camp has some really good ties with Bellator. But if I almost wish they kept like one episode at the end of the series.
Him and Coker are texting back and forth right now.
Yeah, oh yeah, probably. I just don't know if, you know, if Vandefort feels like he's going to be on that short notice call list type thing. Like, I'm sure he is. Like, that would be a good guy to bring in. I think he had.
Why wait for that when you could sign a long-term deal with Bellator and get a 4-fight deal?
No, I'm not going to say that he won't leave his options open for sure. I think like there's likelihood that he may end up in the UFC anyway. It's hard to say. For me, what I would have done, that was a tough one. I probably would have put him on the short notice list. And we'll get to more. Again, this is like the strategic.
As
George Bush would say, this is where the strategery comes into play.
Like, now we're quoting George Bush. Okay.
Yeah, we're getting political here.
God.
But
yeah,
I would have only given out 2 contracts tonight, and I would not have given one to Vandefort. I would have put him on the short notice call list.
Your other contract better not have gone to Pilarte.
No. It wouldn't have.
They were identical fights.
Spoiling the whole rest of the show, Tony.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm getting very. You brought up George Bush, so I'm very animated now.
Should Wickham, Onion, Gaethje. versus Anthony Adams. Split decision. Neither guy was specifically or really stuck out impressive in the impressive department, but also they weren't bad either. So what would you have done with Onion Gaethje?
Just both guys. Both guys to keep an eye on down the road. Obviously no contracts handed out here, no development deals, nothing like that. Just two solid middleweight. Well, one of them I think is actually welterweight in reality, right?
Yep, Adams.
So you have two prospects here that in the 170 and 185 pound division to keep an eye on in the future, but nothing more than that. I think just a couple of guys, keep in mind down the road.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. They were more green than I thought they were going to be, both of them. But I think that they also showed maybe more potential than I thought. Like I thought they were going to be a little more seasoned and less like, oh, this guy could be really good 3 fights from now. And
is it really hipsterish of me to like say that I thought the loser was a little bit more impressive?
No, not at all. I mean, he was a welterweight that was moving up to 185 on 7 days' notice too. Like, I mean, that's impressive within itself.
Yeah, and I thought that was obviously the circumstances surrounding it, and then just coming from what's the promotion out in God, where was he fighting? Colorado?
SCL or something.
Yeah, it's like you're not really expecting much, right? Your expectations are very low.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed I was basically very impressed with how much he exceeded my. It's like when you go to a movie that you're expecting to be really bad, it has like a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, and you're like, oh wow, that was actually pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, man. But yeah, I would have done the same thing as you. I think like throw him back in the regional circuit. Not ruling out any possibilities going forward, but he's not going to be a guy that I'm going to like go out of my way to grab right off the bat so nobody else takes him. Like none of that. But
like what they should have done with Vanderford.
Yeah. Whatever you say.
That's going to bite him in the ass, dude. If they don't, unless there's some weird. And did we ever clear this up? Are these guys that come when they sign their agreement to come on Dana White's Contender Series? Is there some kind of exclusive negotiating rights following that?
Yes. My understanding is yes. I at least last year there was some of the guys that I talked to, I believe they said it was a month.
Oh, just a month.
After the Contender Series ended, something like that. So I think the UFC has the specific negotiating rights to go back to the fighter. Say like somebody goes down on the August 7th card. Like they have the rights to these guys until the Contender Series ends, so that they could bring them in for short notice replacements, stuff like that. That was my understanding. Maybe somebody else knows more about it than I do.
Comment down below if you think we're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Co-main event it was the fight we talked about that was stellar. Vince Morales versus Domingo Pilarte. Pilarte gets the second round submission, rear naked choke. What would you have done with Domingo Pilarte? He did. By the way, we should probably have prefaced this before. Shabazian got signed. Dana White made that decision. Vanderford did not. Chip Wickham did not. And now we're on to Domingo Pilarte. So what would you have done?
This was a tough one because, I already said they should sign or have I said they should sign Vanderford, right?
Yeah.
And you have identical fights here, so I mean I feel like you just have to I mean if I look like a hypocrite now if I say that Pilarte doesn't deserve it if Vanderford does.
That's the dilemma that I was getting into. And this is actually an interesting question. My dad actually watched the episode tonight, and we were debating about this. Do you think that in these scenarios, getting hurt more in a fight and coming back is impressive, or getting hurt less in a fight and coming back is impressive? Because on one hand, you didn't take the damage. On the other hand, you rallied from the depths of defeat even more.
It depends on your opponent. If you're facing a really tough guy which Pilarte and Vanderford both were. You know, and it also, you know, obviously, if you take less, the guy who has better defense and is taking less damage, I think you could give the nod to him. Okay, yeah, like, and that's separate from the issue of Edmund, where it's just it's the outside circumstances where the competition he fought was not very good, and then we only saw 40 seconds of him, so I still don't know anything about him really. Not enough to sign him to a UFC deal, that's for sure. You know, so it's different where you have Pilarte, who I believe was fighting in I think it was Legacy and LFA, and before that Fury. So this is a guy who, you know, like I said, had the pedigree coming in. And if you're gonna sign, basically, I feel like Dana's a hypocrite here, because if you're gonna sign Pilarte, why are you not signing Vanderford?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason that I could possibly think of would be the reason that would have, if somebody held a gun to my head and made me, if the White decision went wrong and I had a gun to my head, the only reason that I would go with Pilarte, because like you said, I think the fights were identical, is I think Morales is more of a standout fighter in the bantamweight division in the regional scenes than Trevino was. And that's, again, like, now I'm breaking my own rules here. I'm going back to things that outside of tonight's card. Like, Trevino's a good fighter, but he wasn't somebody I thought was a shoo-in for the show. On the other hand, Morales in my opinion, was a shoo-in for the show, and Pilarte beat him as an underdog. So that would really be the only thing that I could go off of, would be the level of competition.
But
they're both really good.
I mean, it's really hard to predict this, obviously. Yeah. But who do you think will go on to have a better MMA career, Pilarte or Vanderford?
I think Vanderford.
Okay. Sure. So do you think this was the right decision?
I mean, again, this is starting to get into like these other, because then you have the reverse of this, where you say, is Vanderford, is it too early? Would another fight outside the UFC benefit him? Because he's not at the talent, he's not competing successfully against the talent level that Pilarte was in this fight, in Morales. At the same time, we've seen in the past with Sage Northcutt and fighters like that you wouldn't. It's the worst thing in the world to rush these guys, in my opinion. Like, I'm totally okay with Vanderford getting another fight outside the UFC, because I think it's just going to help him regardless. As disappointing as it may seem to him tonight, I think in the long run it might help him. So there's a lot of stuff to weigh here, man. There's just so many different factors, but I guess that's
at least it looks like
decision and not the King decision.
Looking at our chat now, it looks like the MMA Takeover agrees with me over you. Thank you very much.
Of course he does. He's chirping.
He says, I think Vanderford deserved the contract more than Pilarte did.
Is there a way to block comments? Because Keith is about to Keith may be our only commenter tonight, but I'm okay. I liked it better when we didn't have anybody in the chat room.
What? I like this. I like the interaction. Come on. I wish we had more commenters.
Keith, I know where you live, man.
That sounds like a threat.
Yeah, don't comment in our chat. You get threatened.
Jesus. No, we embrace the bait.
Check him out. You know, if you're watching this on live or replay, check out Keith at the MMA Takeover. He's phenomenal. The reason I say that I know where he lives is because he was kind enough to house me one night, make me, his wife made us breakfast going to Brooklyn. It was always great. He's a great guy. Somebody who's really passionate about the sport. So I'll give him his plug, even though what is it again? When they go low, we go high, that whole thing. That's what's happening here.
I just think he disagrees with you because I'm right. I mean, I think that's what it is.
See, but it's gotten to the point with him now where he tries to fuck with me no matter what happens. So I don't even know when he's telling the truth or when he's not.
I mean, I think most people agree with me and most people disagree with you on this.
Okay. Well, I mean, considering there's three of us that have given our opinions and it's 2-1, I guess you're right in this instance.
It's such a petty thing to argue over.
All right. Next, what ended up happening, Pilarte got signed to the UFC. He's the newest member of the UFC's bantamweight division. Macy Barber versus Jamie Colleen, the late third-round TKO victory by Barber. did you think that her getting a UFC contract was the right decision? We talked about this quite a bit.
Yes, definitely. I'm super excited for this. Totally on board. I don't even care if she didn't get the fucking finish. She was dominant. Fuck the haters. No, I'm just kidding. Macy Barber is a legit prospect. I don't want to get too far into like the whole hype train thing because then people will start hating her like they hate everybody else.
For you. I got one for you. Will she do what she said she's going to do and become the youngest UFC champion ever? You got 3 years.
115 pounds? Unless they created atomweight division, she can cut
3 years though, too.
Huh?
Just 3 years, I believe, right? How old was John Jones when he won?
How old is she right now, though? Like, as far 20. As when did she turn 20?
Oh, I don't know. But I thought she said something. Maybe it was an old interview I was reading or something, but I thought she said she had 3 years.
3 full years? Or like?
Yeah, because Jones was 23 when he won. And, I mean,
and how many months or days?
Jones was 23 and 10 months. And Macy Barber,
nearly 24 years old.
Exactly. And Macy Barber, let's see.
I'm making you do hella research right now.
He just turned 20.
See, Keith is being nice. He said thanks.
Oh. I'm starting to like it.
Comment for whatever reason, but
yeah.
No, like I don't think.
Essentially, she's almost got 4 years to do this. She's got over 3.5 years.
I'm still gonna say because I mean, how many times can you fight in a year? You can fight. I mean,
probably 3 would be on average a realistic goal.
Realistically, 3. You figure at some point probably suffers an injury. Yeah. Shit happens.
It's not a million strawweights in the UFC either.
There's a lot, and then you get to that thing, and I talk about this with a lot of divisions where you have this upper echelon, just kind of this core group of fighters, and 115 is one of those divisions where you get up. I'm gonna take a look at the UFC rankings because I don't really know where it starts, but I know that they do have, just that class above everybody else kind of group. At 115, so unless they're opening an atom weight and she can cut down to there, then I don't think so. But yeah, looking right now, so you have Rose, Joanna, Andrade, Gadelia, Kovacevic, Tisha Torres, Carla Esparza, these kind of girls. So you have those, what is that, 6 or 7 fighters? Which you consider like the upper echelon, and it's going to be real tough for her to go through that without suffering a loss, basically.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I figured I'd throw that question out there and see if you bit at it. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's like pump the brakes on this whole thing. Like the girl just won her UFC contract. I know she kind of brought it upon herself making these type of claims, but when people start making these type of claims like, oh, she's 3 years down the line, she's going to be doing this, like that's just such a hard – that's like a prediction that I don't even want to make.
Though. You always want to – what's that old saying? You want to shoot –
for the stars.
Shoot for the stars and hit the moon or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
That's an old people saying.
Sure.
It applies. I mean, I think her head's in the right place.
Right.
She's setting her sights very high, setting high expectations, and as long as she's someone who has her head screwed on straight and is able to deal, if she does suffer a loss to one of those top girls that I just named, which I think is very likely. Like we have to be honest here.
It can be a beneficial thing too. It's not necessarily a long-term thing. It's bad. Yeah.
I mean, Rose lost the current champion. Rose has suffered defeat before, and it's made her a better fighter. She is very young as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of, 115 is a good division. It's, not to shit on 135, but it's not 135. So it's going to be tough for her. Like I said, unless they open an atomweight division, or maybe I think if she was a bantamweight, I might be saying different things, basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like you said, I think she has her head screwed on straight, and she is somebody that clearly is driven and believes in herself. Which, if you're not either one of those things, chances are that you're not going to be able to even achieve the goal of being a champion or even close. So she's on her way, but I don't. I think people are already making these claims outside of her, people that believe in her, train with her. So I just think in general.
And we lost Nolan. So we basically went through the whole podcast. And we'll see you guys next week, unless Nolan pops in any second now. Otherwise, that was the ContenderCast episode 5, and we'll be back next week. It's the Nick Newell episode, so a lot to talk about there. A lot of coverage on MMA Today. Oh, you're back.
Hey, see, sometimes, usually at this point, I've seen this with Google Hangouts quite a bit. People have connection issues. The shit, hits the fan, and somebody disconnects. You talk for a while, try to make things seem comfortable. You're not. The reason that this just shut off, not connection issues, not battery. It was my hand gestures were getting a little too emphatic. I was getting too into this, and I accidentally exited out.
Italian in you.
Apparently, I didn't know King was an Italian last name, but might have to do ancestry.com, see what's up there.
I mean, you're from the East Coast. There has to be some Italian in you.
Yeah, probably.
I won't make that joke. Never mind. That's not appropriate.
I thought you were going down that way. I was trying to lead you away from it, but we got there anyway. And yeah, so basically, I was just saying I don't like to make those type of predictions yet because I just feel like, for me personally, it's too far for me to even predict something like that.
I had a question. Well, basically, I was going to make you matchmaker. What match her up? First UFC.
Honestly, like I like to do with most UFC debutants, whoever they are. I don't care if you're Macy Barber or somebody that's I've absolutely never heard of from, Southeast Asia or something. I always like to give them another debuting fighter or somebody that is either 1-0 or 0-1, somebody like that. So I'd have to look at the division to actually make that type of a pick, but I wouldn't throw her in there too quickly. I don't think there's levels to this. Like, you can try to jump up 3 stairs when you're climbing the ladder. Sometimes you'll catch yourself, but oftentimes you'll fall off. That's my really poetic way of putting it. So yeah, I don't know. I'd give her another young up-and-comer or somebody that just is signed to the UFC.
Yeah, I agree. You give her someone probably that has had 1 or 2 UFC fights, someone like that. Keith says it is a bit of an easier feat for her to accomplish, though, as the women's division is a lot shallower. When Jones came in the UFC, the light heavyweight division had Shoguns, Evan, Machida, Rampage, names off, all the big names that that were in that division, which is absolutely true. Jones' feat will probably always be the most impressive. His run to the title and title defenses and all that was just ridiculous. But again, women's strawweight is not women's bantamweight. It's not it would still be impressive, very impressive. I'm at the point where I just don't think it happens, though. I see it as something very hard to accomplish. Yeah. Rose, I think, came into the UFC at a very young age, and she is now the champion, has defended the belt and everything. But she, like I said, she had to take some losses along the way. And I think by the time she became champion, this was last year, November of last year, which would make her, well, she's 26 right now, so that would make her 25. So she was 25 when she beat Joanna for the belt.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I think that I think it would be nearly. It would be. It's not it's not undoable because Jones did it, and like he said, in harder circumstances. But it's definitely a tough road, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, we still got time. Maybe a year. Maybe on the the White Decision / Contender Cast season 3, we'll maybe go back and recap some of the fighters that have competed this season. See if our predictions. We'll bring off some clips.
This is very comparable to Rose's. I mean, because Rose had just turned 22 years old when she made her UFC debut. Had just turned 22.
Yeah. So that is very comparable. And, you know, like Keith said too, though, the women's divisions in general, just as a sport, honestly, and people will hurl sexist claims about this. Like, it's not even sexist. It's just the sport. The women's side of the sport has not been around even close to the men's side of the sport. Like, there are some great athletes that are achieving great things, but just imagine like 2 years down the line, how many women fighters are going to be. Barbara's that next wave, and she's coming in at a good time where there's not a whole lot. Obviously, there's some very talented women. There's not a whole lot of talent, that are these. We talk about it with the men too. Like, there's this generation that just grew up and just grew into MMA almost. And she's part of that wave, and we have had very few fighters, women's fighters, that have done that, followed that path. So we'll see what happens, man. But I'm interested in seeing what she's up to.
Did you think my take was a little too scorching hot? The next Aaron Pico?
It's so tough to me because it's not like it's the furthest thing from the truth, but I also at the same time, like, I think what Pico has done, I would say is really different than anything I've ever seen. Like, him being so skilled in multiple aspects of like wrestling, boxing, and then he puts them together. Like, he's not somebody that just was the super prospect that grew up like doing MMA. Like, he pieced all this together, all these different aspects in sports that he was successful in, pieced them together, comes in, and then in his second pro fight is taking down guys that have, they're not like, I see some people talking about Pico like, oh, he's fighting cans. Like, he's in his second pro fight, and he's fighting guys that, are solid prospects. I don't – I wouldn't put him at that level yet, but she could get there. She could get there.
Yeah. I mean, off topic, but, yeah, the last – what was it? The one in his most recent where he snatched the body in L.A.?
Yeah.
I was there live. He's fighting a guy that trains down here in San Diego. Super legit. I knew going into that. I knew it was going to be a tough fight for Pico. Actually, that was the second to last fight.
Yeah, I mean, like, just pretend that Aaron Pico is some other prospect that you've never heard of. His opponents.
I have seen every Aaron Pico fight live. I've covered every Aaron Pico fight live.
Yeah, I was at the debut. I wasn't, obviously those other 3 were West Coast, but I mean, looking at his opponents, man, like, trying to do the math in my head, but I think there's something like 37-11 through his first, his 3 wins. Like, if I saw a 4-0 fighter that their 3 wins or like, that's unheard of. That's just an incredible feat. Like I said, the women's divisions are just less developed. So even the top talent that Barbara's fighting, it's not like it's the type of talent that she's going to fight. It's not like it was UFC level talent per se.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But anyways, last thing we have to do before we go, I know this has been another elongated episode where maybe I shouldn't be hosting anymore, but just kind of my brief 1-minute rundown of next week's card, just kind of what I know without having done too much tape research, just from following these guys and seeing seeing what's up with them. But I actually think next week's card is a really good one. I think that the last 3 to end it are going to be really good. I think they're going to increase in both excitement and the level of fights that we're going to see. So July 24th, the first fight to kick off that episode is between the 2 youngest fighters to be on Contender Series this season, I believe. We have 18-year-old Chase Cooper going against 20-year-old Kenan Kawahe, who's from, you guessed it, Hawaii. Two of the youngest fighters. They're combined age of 38 years old, which is pretty crazy when you think of that. Hooper's a guy from the Northwest. He is, part of this new wave of fighters that they seem to be in a little bit of a lull. Like, they had Austin Arnett, who was their big star, come in, and they're starting to get some guys from Oregon, really, that area. But he's from, I believe Washington State. So he's a guy that he's so young in the sport. I think he might be the youngest guy to ever compete on Contender Series. So, we'll see what's up with him. And Kanan Kawai, who is only 3 fights into his professional career. He's part of the new wave of Hawaiian fighters that are coming in. So that will be interesting. Then in the second fight of the evening, we have the LFA heavyweight champ Jeff Hughes, a guy who a lot of people thought should have just been signed to the UFC at this point, against Josh Apelt. Apelt is most well known for his fight against Bobby Lashley in Bellator. Actually,
this is very weird though.
Yeah,
because this was a guy who had obviously everybody remembers the Bobby Lashley fight, right? But he had multiple Bellator fights. Like, I think he at one point was on a long-term deal with Bellator. This has to be the first guy that was signed to a long-term Bellator deal that's getting a shot on the Contender Series, right?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but that's probably a good guess on your part. I actually talked to him about that a little bit. We're going to have an interview coming out with MMA Today on before the next episode, and he was saying that that's been something that has always not necessarily struck a chord with him, but he said everybody remembers me for my Bobby Lashley fight, and I was so much more than that. I had a handful of knockout wins for Bellator too, but yeah, he's a much more experienced guy than we're used to on the Contender Series.
Way more experienced.
Yeah. I was a little
put it lightly. Like this guy, this is an odd choice.
Right. He's got 21 fights, 15-6, and he's
like 5 of them are in Bellator.
Yeah.
The other ones are in California regional, but
yeah. And again, this is one of those things. Like I kind of pay attention to things. Obviously, like at MMA Today, we pay attention to prospects across the board. But the way Tapology is set up, which is what I use mostly for research on prospects, is a lot of times it's regionally set. So you have the top 10 heavyweights in California. I've noticed he's been a guy that's kind of hovered towards the top of those ratings. Like he's beaten a lot of the guys that they thought were going to be the next big thing. So it's just the way that the heavyweight scene is right now. I think in the North America, a lot of the heavyweights that haven't come to the UFC are actually from overseas or not from the States. So having to force all of these heavyweight showcase fights, like they want to get we need to get Jeff Hughes an opponent, so they get Jeff Hughes, Josh Apelt. It just shows you how, because I think Apelt is a good regional heavyweight. He's honestly kind of like a West Coast Greg Rebello of sorts. So I think he will be a good competitive. He's a competitor. He's somebody that will not just lay down or will be somebody that Hughes. I don't think necessarily Hughes will just run through him. Of course, this is heavyweight. Anything can happen. I think Hughes should win this fight. He'll probably be a heavy favorite, rightfully so. But I think it's not the worst pick. I think on just the age and the fact that he's fought for Bellator makes it look way worse. But on the converse side of the spectrum, we have one of the best fights, I think, on Contender Series. Certainly my favorite fight on this card. Mike Davis, Beastie Boy, a guy that's just run through people in a short period of time to get a 5-0 record against Sadiq Youssef, another guy, a former, I believe, Titan FC title challenger. That's just a phenomenal fight. They have an 11-1 combined record with extensive amateur career, I believe. So that's a good fight. Co-main event, Jim Crute versus Chris Birchler. Honestly, don't know a whole lot about either one of these guys. Birchler is, I believe.
Well, because Crute, I know, has been all over if you search our site.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, I actually think that Chris Birchler, as I recall, he was supposed to fight at a Bellator card I went to when Bjorn Rebney was still in charge back in the day. He was supposed to fight Josh Diekman, who's a local heavyweight in the region.
Yeah.
So he might. I'll have to go and look at his record, but he might have actually competed for Bellator too. Way back in the day. But he's an American. Chris Birchler. Jim Crute is a undefeated fighter out of Australia. He's one of the few fighters that the UFC has brought in from outside of the country to be on this Contender Series. 23 years old, light heavyweight. On paper, would be a good guy to add to the division, and he's got a stiff test in a veteran in Chris Birchler.
I think he's definitely popped up on our site before.
Yeah, I think Sean has done a lot of stuff. Sean Bitter is the Australia and New Zealand site manager for Tapology. So I'm sure he has done some extensive coverage on Crute.
Yeah, just looking at our site real quick, I see, DC Howard, obviously watched one of his fights in Hex, which is the New Zealand / Australian promotion. He had the title over there. It sounds like he had a lot of hype already back then. This is from, what is this from? The beginning of 2018. So sounds like he got a pretty dominant win here. And DC's high on him, and so is Sean, because I think I've seen him pop up in the prospect reports and whatnot before.
Yeah, I'll definitely go back and research them more. But that leads us to our main event, obviously the highlight of this week. Nick Newell is going to be making his Contender Series appearance against Alex Munoz from Team Alpha Male, one of the wrestling coaches, as I understand it, a 4-0 fighter. And that'll be a good one.
This is very interesting, because I figured they would give him a striker, right? And instead they give him a wrestler. And
I kind of like it, to be honest with you. It's not like some super duper that we know of, a super duper proven wrestler. I feel like we have a guy that is clearly good at wrestling that Newell's going to take on. Like for example, if they gave him a 4-0 guy that was a striker or was kind of more of a mixed martial artist, I think. Why? What were you going to say about it?
I was just going to say it was interesting. I thought it was interesting matchmaking, because I thought they were going to give him a striker.
Yeah.
And also, we really haven't seen, even though you might call him a relative unknown, I think his wrestling pedigree kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah. We
really haven't seen Newell fight somebody, who's trying to take him down instead of the other way around.
Right.
Where, and if people aren't familiar with Newell at all, his base is actually wrestling. So, believe it or not, with this disability and whatnot, if you go and watch tape on him, a lot of it is him taking guys down. So it's very interesting.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Very good.
I was gonna say, and that's the thing. Like you said, we haven't really. I'll have to go back and think. There was a fight that I was at of his in Connecticut against Tommy Marcelino that was kind of. It almost started a riot when they read his name to win the fight. It was a close fight. But I'm trying to think the last fight where Newell was kind of taken down and controlled. Again, I've been kind of backed up on my tape study, so it's been happening later and later in the week. So I'll have to go back and look at that. But I think it's interesting they're matching him up with a wrestler as well.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good week. And we got 2 more after that. So episode 6 next week, episode 7 the following week, and episode 8 the first week in August. But that's pretty much all we got for you guys. Hopefully none of you there's a handful of people watching live right now. I'm hoping that nobody fell asleep at their computer. But we will make sure to post the replay up on YouTube, and it will also go out on the MMA Today podcast circuit
network.
And that is pretty much it for now. What do you have to say? One last thing, Tone.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's the podcast network.
Okay, the podcast network. I like the podcast circuit. That's kind of cool.
And yes,
Circuit City. Remember that?
Yes. You can find us on. I would assume this will go up on SoundCloud at some point, and then also we'll post it on MMAtoday.com, the website. So
yeah, absolutely. And I actually just looked at our chat, and this is actually the first ever ContederCast. We only had one N, so that is a first. We have many firsts here, and that's pretty much it. That's all we got. That's Big Tone. You can follow him at Big Tone MMA on Twitter. Follow our site at MMA Today News.
We're ending this on you criticizing my typo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's just a brilliant note to leave off on.
You're not going to be able – I'm not – you know what? I'm taking over back the reins of hosting next week.
Okay, you got it. Maybe we won't have 2-hour episodes.
You can do the typing. You can do the typing.
That sounds good. That sounds more my speed. But at MMA Kings, at MMA_Kings, apparently I can't type in my head, You can follow me on Twitter. Got some more Contender Series coverage coming up for next week. Should have a much more stacked lineup of interviews than I had this week. This week was kind of a little bit more down low. And that's pretty much all we've got for you guys. I thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with another ContenderCast.
ContenderCast, season 2, episode 5. That's have a good night, guys.